Just before the demo starts, sorry, I also know that sometimes posting in the channel can be intimidating. So if you have a question that you want to post in the channel, you can let us know and we can help you understand how you would go through the process of asking that, what you would want to share, etc. Because, you know, a lot of the times we all have to ask questions and the answer will be there. So you want to make sure you get the right information. It can be frustrating. So just let us know if you have a question you want to post in there, but you're not sure how to ask it, because we can also help with that. And Regis and Catherine, I'll let you take it away whenever you're ready.
And so to set expectations for everyone, can you just first tell us sort of what the form is, why it exists, and then show us what you've done, as opposed to just jump into what we've done. And then for everyone, usually the way we do these, we're looking to give whatever feedback the demo folks are looking for. I think at this stage, it's and well, the thing to also recognize for the people taking the feedback, everyone's going to give a lot of feedback. We can titrate how much feedback they do or don't give based upon sort of your needs, but don't ever fall under the mistaken belief that you have to do everything that someone gives you feedback on. The key thing during a demo is to just capture all of that feedback. And then you may decide that, you know, these 3 are actionable items that we want to incorporate in our next version, but there's all this other stuff that we just can't get to right now. Or there's some stuff that maybe we just never want to get to, but your goal, or your job is just to capture that feedback. You can obviously have a conversation during that. It's not like you have to be just a empty passive receptacle, but don't worry about having to do. It's not like we're giving you a to-do list and you have to do everything. So we're giving you a menu, and then you'll get to decide later what you want to do. And that's just for everyone, so that you're familiar with the way these work. All right. And of course, the place to keep that feedback is in issues in your GitHub repo.
Yeah, and just to, if you can, when you're introducing this to the form, also tell us what kind of feedback you're looking for right now.
So you just want us to share the screen? Regis, you want to do it?
Yeah, sure, I can do it. So the nature of the form, and Catherine, feel free to hop in because you did a little bit more research on that end than I did. It's for the appeals court, and the user can either be the plaintiff or the defendant, and it is a motion. I believe take over.
I believe it's when you file your appeals late, so you miss your deadline, and now you're asking for an excuse to file your appeal out of time.
That is the nature of the form. I have 8 million windows open as per usual, so hopefully I get the right one.
Can you send us maybe a link to the form itself so we can see it?
Sure.
As we're going through the interview.
I can do that, Regis, while you pull up your screen.
Okay.
And for persistence issues, please do that in the team as opposed to the Zoom.
Okay.
Okay. Is that shareable to everyone?
Yep, I see it.
Awesome. In terms of feedback, I mean, I know it's not particularly useful to say anything, but I'm not one to scoff or deny any feedback. So I'll try to point out things as we run through that maybe we plan on changing or correcting, just to kind of save any breath that someone might have. But yes. So this is just kind of a placeholder screen right now. We're going to add more information. When we get more information, probably from the appeals court regarding the nature of the form and some instructions and things like that. I don't need to like describe everything, do I? Or should I? Okay.
So I'm just noticing for us, it said, what is the name of the second person on your second other person on your case? And I think that's an AL assembly line question, right?
Yep.
And I think just a note for us, if someone can make the issue, that's a bit confusing because it's the first other person on your case. It's the second person on your case, but it's the first other person on your case. So. Yep. A note on how you test this stuff, and also when you reach questions that you wrote yourself, if you can take some more time with those and tell
Okay.
us that.
Yep.
But also when testing, if you can put in different names for people, even if it's just like user 1, user 2, you'll be able to test the form much more easily and tell if things are going in the right places.
Okay. So this is one that the appeals court requested. They requested some more formatting as an option that they would like to see, but this was kind of like an MVP that they indicated that they were okay with. As it stands right now, we do still need to add this variable into the form, but we already created an issue for that.
So if probably everyone else on this call who has more legal experience than me, from what I remember, the trial court department is like 1 of 7, right? So that should probably become a drop down. And is the division just like the location, like the county? Like, is the division the Suffolk part in the probate and family court?
So I think really this can turn into, because we know the division if you just tell us the court. So this is, I suspect, going to turn into more of a, what court was it? Just tell us the name of the court. And then, the code will be able to tell the department and the division.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there should be some examples from some of the other appeals court forms that might show how to use the selector that way. They might have been made before we migrated to AL documents, but we could certainly help with that using that selector.
This is one
actually, if you just make a reference to trial_court.
Yes.
And trial_court.department, trial_court.division, you won't need to write that question at all. Now that I think about it.
Though you'll want to make sure to
you'll probably want to customize the help text at least.
Take out the address as well, so that it's not based on an address.
I don't think that will matter if it's using the mass access code. The address will appear if they're not using that.
Okay. And the other thing is, this is one we discussed a little bit, and we thought of a few different variations on how to do this. But I've been thinking, and if they have the name of the court, they can it's alphabetical, so they should be able to just find it on a list. We were thinking maybe we would narrow down if it's a superior court or whatever, but then you have to explain where to find that in the paperwork, as opposed to just saying, look for the name of the court, right?
And I just want to, sorry.
Oh no, I came in out of order. I don't know what happened. I was just going to say it sounded like we were talking about how you can use the basic questions to address this.
Yes, and I wanted to check that what everyone just said makes sense to just all of the newer students, and kind of maybe take a moment to break that down while we have a few extra minutes, because we have the court selector that has all of this data about the courts and information about them, and it has these 2 parts included in that information. And so they're saying you can leverage that, and you can ask a different question that will select that court and all of the different parts of that information about the court, even if the user doesn't select those small pieces of information, and just take what you need from there, essentially.
Yeah,
price.
and I was gonna say specifically, I think it would be better to ask the user for the court, because like, say someone who's going to court, they're not necessarily gonna know like what parts of the department, what parts of the division. They're gonna know like, oh, I went to this address to like do this court, or like this was the address I had to fill out on my forms. And so they'll know the location a bit better. They won't know all the details of it. And so just from like whoever's going through this like interview, that's something they would be able to immediately jump to a bit quicker than what is a department like. Yeah.
And I think part of the thing for Regis and Catherine, and correct me if I'm wrong, Catherine or Regis, is that the trial court specifically said, ask them about the department first and then narrow down and ask them about the division. They had a specific UI they were interested in. And the question would be, I think, in a more like, tactical Tuesday kind of way. Is it okay to just do a totally different UI and be like, is this sufficient? Because, and then explain that it is more difficult to communicate that other method to the user.
My suspicion is that the expression of a UI, as it were, in the appeals documents that came over, because this is from the appeals court, was really just illustrative as opposed to confining. So it was just trying to, I think it was them trying to be helpful and anticipating how to go forward. So our relationship with the appeals court is such that I would say, go ahead and make it the easiest UI that we think is the easiest. Also, we've already done a similar question to this in the other appeals court forms. So, which uses the appeals basic questions version of basic questions, and so that would be the one you could leverage that as well, because we know they already like that.
And just to clarify, this is like how the name questions happen automatically and how the other things, how other questions happen automatically. You would just put the word, and I can put it in Slack, the words trial_court for folks who are curious, and into your interview order block, and that question will be asked at that time.
And the larger lesson, I'm sorry, I was dealing with some remote stuff, but not remote because I'm remote. It was immediate stuff. Everyone's fine though. But for everyone, one of the lessons here is there might be sets of questions that you might think, oh, I bet that comes up a lot, and you're probably right. And if it comes up a lot and it wasn't something that was caught in the Weaver, then it's quite possible that either just the naming you had on the Weaver didn't catch it, or we might have thought about it a little differently than you had. So it's worth worth pinging. And you'll learn this as you go through and have more experience with different forms. But there might already be something written. So instead of having to reinvent the wheel, you just be like, this seems like a complicated process that should be happening every time we deal with the court. Is it something we've already done? And it might be. And then we can just reference you to do it. So important lesson there.
And if it's not, then you should let us know, because we want to know anyway, because if it is something that's common to deal with, then maybe we need to add it to our library.
And Matt, just for some context, that you've happened in, we're doing a little demo, but we expect to get to sort of standard open questions for Teaching Tuesday here in a few moments.
Great, thanks.
Awesome.
Okay, go ahead, Regis. Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to do like a dependent dropdown using a series of if statements, and it got very, very long, very, very quickly. So that's definitely good to know that there are tools available. So that's good. And then the appeals court would like, and we have to talk to the court about this, an option that if we leave this blank, it provides a link to a separate form, to an external form, an indigency form. But that's something that we have to talk to them about in terms of what kind of format they would like for that, because I noticed that there were some examples in previous interviews that took a couple different approaches. So we figured for the time being, we would just leave this as an optional field and then get some clarification.
And
We're not even sure if they need that form of indigency, right? There's a question on that.
Yeah, I also I feel like because if David, do you from what I remember we have an affidavit of indigency
do.
we have that we can use for the appeals, and I don't know if they are like if it's something that they just want to check, like, oh, they could need
yeah,
an
it only needs to be
affidavit and
attached to
fill it,
some
or-
filings. So I'm not sure on the posture of this. I suppose it's possible if you're filing this as your first thing you're filing with the appeals court. So the other party has initiated the appeal and you have some motion that you're filing, but you haven't yet filed with the appeals court. And that might be a situation where you would still have to do the affidavit of indigency. Also, I liked what Regis said about other interviews. So that's a good thing that everyone hopefully gets into the practice of doing, which is going and see what other interviews people have done, especially if there's something already in the same court or same department that you've worked with. It's possible other people have solved some of these problems in their interviews. And so even if there aren't basic questions you can pull, you might be able to pull inspiration from the way other people have done it, either from their layout or their code. So I just wanted to normalize the idea of looking at other people's interviews to get ideas.
The question of like what to do if they need to fill out another form for it, MVP might be to point them at another form, but an issue to possibly add to GitHub for a later version is to handle that form in here with its questions so that they don't have to go fill out a PDF.
And the appeals court integration that has the that's the way they do it. It's a form that gets included. So the proximate question to ask is to get clarification from the appeals court as to what they meant and what is actually required. And so one of the things I think you should be thinking about when you're thinking about issues, there are sort of like suggestions and things people might say, oh, this would be nice. But then there are the questions that you have that we can bundle and give to the appeals court to say, what did you really mean by this? Or can you give us some clarity here? And we have a very good relationship. And the entire idea behind this agile process is that you really involve people. So it's not you do a lot of building and you wait and you hope you got everything right. It's when you have a question, you ask the question.
So hang on, is this one of your questions? Remember, we're looking at your questions. All right. Was the previous one of your questions as well?
This one, yes.
Okay. Hang on. I think from the lower court. Okay. I mean, there might be more. I guess we won't work on language right now because that can take forever. So
I also think this demo was less of a like we have something done or a prototype demo. This is more of a like we just have something that works. We wanted to incentivize people to share that so we can all celebrate that win.
Sure. Okay. So let's just go through it. Yeah.
Simple. I was gonna say simple win is you can change, like once you get the trial court information, you'll be able, you can use, instead of saying lower court, you can say what trial court it actually is. So like what notice or what day you got it from the Suffolk probate court or whatever. Yeah.
This is another one that I don't want to say that I wrote because I just pulled it directly from the list of questions that the appeals court wanted us to ask. So there's definitely room to adjust the formatting. I definitely think that the top question is a bit, I think there's room, but that could be a later.
And like a good question for this kind of field for an SME, which I don't know who is SME in this kind of situation, but is like, do you want to give them a big text field to type all this stuff in, or is that usually not helpful? And do you instead want to give them a small field, like a one-line field that doesn't have as much room for elaboration? Or do they need guiding questions, et cetera, et cetera? So I don't know who would be the SME, but that is a okay thing.
And then I'm just seeing here, we'd probably, once you get to the plain language stage, we'd probably try to, obviously, and you already noted this, just like describe, instead of saying, having these terms of art here, excusable neglect, why is it late,
And receipt even. So yeah, there'll be some.
But those are just
cool.
things to keep in mind at this stage.
Yeah.
And that similar to the previous question, it was asked by the court. So they're pretty identical production on the form. This is another one that we added that we had a meeting with Aubrey this morning. We'll probably rephrase and restructure this question as well. Additionally, another one that we added, we have an issue for it now in GitHub to include some type of option for if there's more than one party, because when it produces in the form, it could have multiple names. So just grammatically, it would be like 2 names has, but you'll see on the.
Is there a question of, you might provide an option for I don't know there.
Okay.
Like
Well, that was the question that changes it to has or has not.
Yep.
So we'd have to add a third, I don't know. They have not, or I don't know.
right.
Or also a help to tell them to give instructions on how to find out, like what that means.
Or that could be in the sub question so that they don't
And
have
this-
to look for it.
Now I know why Aubrey was asking about what she was asking about in our earlier meeting. So again, some of this has been handled in another one of the appeals interviews. So you might be able to take some stuff from there.
Another one that we added, just simple drop down, and then
Do we have a basic question for delivery? I thought we did. 'cause
Yeah, we were-
everybody uses it.
In the appeals court, there's a special way that we've been doing it, and it's not in all the forms. So yes, we do, and that's what I was referring to with the discussion with Aubrey earlier.
So it's not in the Library of Mass Access or Assembly Line so far.
It hasn't been moved there yet.
Okay.
But there is an appeals thing that we could lift for this.
another question, I believe that we pulled.
Nice use of Mako there. Even if it is regardless of. Oh, was this an assembly line question?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, got it.
This is a question that we added.
I would put that next to how you going to serve, but I think the service questions might take care of it.
Is this a special signature page? I don't feel like I haven't seen other signature page have, say, penalty of perjury.
Yeah, so that was another question that we were going to ask the appeals court, because on their list of questions, they included that sign under penalty of perjury at one point, specifically in the list of questions, but then there's still the signing the document question at the very end. So we have to ask if they want 2 signatures on the form, or if just the one would suffice.
So we have a question for penalties of perjury specifically?
No, this is the question as to whether or not, this is the question in relationship to the service. Is that correct, Regis?
I believe
This
so.
is not that signature. Oh, Catherine's saying, no, it's not this signature. Which signature is this?
I thought this was the signature block, and then the second one was the certificate of service.
Yes.
All right, so either way, there are two, Michelle, the distinction is there's a signature for the document and then for the service. I think, again, this will be useful to look at how we handle the service in the other document.
I am saying
yeah.
that there is a question, I believe, for signing under oath, regardless of how, which, I mean, we
Yeah,
might
I
need to-
suspect the language has been addressed in the appeals court's other matter, in the appeals court, the other forum dealing with service. And even though I know this isn't the service question, this is the other question. But
I mean, an
I'm
actual
saying,
check mark that there's a checkbox question that
okay,
exists
there's a
in the
checkbox.
library
Yeah,
that
and
asks about under oath, and it
Under oath.
explains what under oath means.
well, I think the key thing here is to look at I'm sure that's probably in the other documents. I think we're both saying the same thing, which you should look at the other forms to see if there exists one already.
And maybe if you ask us, one of us can try and track that down.
And then there is, if we want to upload multiple documents, it would seem, as far as we can tell, that the documents have to be within the same local location within the computer. So if it's under one file, if you wanted to pull different files from different folders, I don't know if that, because if you browse again, it overwrites the initial document. So that was something that we have under our issues.
There's some other forms that already that deal with attachments. So we would want to look to those. Again, this is
So-
all good for a first blush, right? Wait, or no? What's that? You don't think there is?
No, I was going to brag for the team, and we pointed them to a GitHub repo without much indication of what part of the code did it, and they pulled this in.
Great.
Nice.
Very
Which
nice.
I was very impressed. I thought that this was a pretty hard one to pull in.
Yeah, that's a hard one to do just right off the bat. So
Yeah.
well done.
It was Regis.
But I do believe we have some examples with multiple documents. So that would be something to look at if we wanted to have multiple documents. Is a question.
So then within the form, it just going to the document upload, they requested a list of the titles of the document, but we are going to switch the list with the document upload. So then it reads on this page and then the attachments go below.
The original page has a bunch of lines with numbers next to them for each exhibit.
But that is the form.
That's the hard part. So you got something, it goes through.
You got it.
It produces a thing on the end. Now it's all just details, right? So
Y'all unmute and clap.
yeah, so that's thank you both for agreeing to share that, because I know it's not at the stage where this is very early. So thank you for sharing that. But also well done. Like getting it to that
Great
point
work.
is quite something. And so now it really is just details. So it's and this is why I was trying to frame at the beginning, which is we threw a lot of things at you. That is all just things to consider and put in a list, and then we'll get to it as time goes. So don't take that feedback for anything but feedback on how to make the form better. I know one of the things that's difficult because different people coming from different experience. I always feel like people who come from art school are much better suited for this than law students, which is people aren't used to sort of like group critiques. But we're really all just trying to give you ideas to help make it better. So well done. All right. however you want to drive us in. Maybe Matt has some questions. Maybe we got some other questions I know.
Yeah, I was gonna say, great job, and thank you for being the first group to do it. I know I've been there. So we'll move into question time, and Matt will volley to you if you had one.
Oh, thanks. I started asking my questions on Teams, and Quentin has been helping me with some of those. So
He's on another call.
I know.
Well, that was earlier today.
Oh, okay.
He wasn't being derelict in his duties at all. He was
I was going to be very
multitasking.
impressed.
Yeah, no, it's been a while. But I will wait on that. I'm actually still reviewing some of that information. So if someone else has something, maybe we can come back to my questions in a minute or two.
Okay. Nope. No pressure.
Thank
Great.
you.
Yeah. I know Ryan, Connor, Donna, you had a question?
Yeah, so we just had a question about like a specific error message that we ran into this morning while we were running through our thing. But if that's something that you think would be better saved just for like the coding help channel afterwards, we can save it. But okay, so
This is the perfect time for this.
perfect. So I can share my screen if you want, but essentially we occasionally run into an error where it's telling us that the like title of the interview is undefined. So like just our name of it, which is like, or like if the interview order, then like petition for name change minor thing is just saying is undefined, which is kind of confusing us because we didn't really realize it was like being considered a variable. We thought it was just saying like, this is the interview order block. So like I can share the screen and show the error message if that would help.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good to know the specific variable name usually.
Yeah. Is this showing correctly?
Yes, it is, but could you scroll to the top?
Yes.
Actually, I probably could have caught it, but that's okay. So that says the list index is out of range, actually. So that is not a problem with something with the variable being undefined. Can you go down to the bottom in that case?
Yeah, so
not,
this
not
might
the
be
whole bottom, but
I was gonna say this might be a good time to go into what DocAssembly actually, like what these error screens actually mean and do. So at the very top, which was like the list index isn't defined, that's the actual error that's happening, and that's likely what is like what the actual thing that's going wrong. However, I don't. So at the very, very top, so like that first line, all the above history.
Oh, sorry.
no, all the way. Error. That
Yes,
first
yes.
thing in gray.
Yes.
Yeah, so that first thing in gray is the actual error that's happening, and
That's like the line where it hit an error.
Okay.
Just to be clear, that's the end of the trail where it hit the error.
So would it help
Sorry.
if I provided like some context on what caused the error to arise?
Yeah, so
Well,
essentially
that's what-
after you,
yeah.
Yeah,
after
so that's
you
what
hit
it's
that,
gonna just wait. Yeah.
I was gonna say after you hit that original error, it then tries to like walk you through the exact path that DocAssembly took to actually find the error. So history starts at the very beginning of I started to run this interview usually.
Yeah.
And then if you answered a bunch of questions in between, it won't like go through all those questions. But then at some point it'll say, oh, I needed to like it'll say like I needed the definition of interview order petition to name change. And that specifically, that variable is just like it's an auto-generated variable. And it makes it easier to get DocAssembly to run in a bit straight of order. So essentially it looks for like DocAssembly will try to set interview order petition or petition to name change. It will somewhere in like somewhere in your code block, the Weaver has set or has made a code block that has all of your questions of like, these are all the questions you need to ask in this particular order. And at the very end of it, it says interview order petition name change. So that's actually a bit of a red herring in this case. So that's not the error that it's coming across, but while it's trying to fix that, it ran into some other problems.
Gotcha.
And so generally, I think my like rule of thumb on errors is you look at the top and like the very first line that it says, this is what went wrong. And then you go to the very, very bottom, which gives you more context around what it went wrong. And if you're confused, you can go back up sort of like block by block of, okay, what's like, how did it get to this place? You go up a block, you say, oh, it was trying to ask this question. Like this, and like in this particular code block, maybe something's in the wrong order, or in stuff, sort of stuff like that.
Okay.
Sorry, so that was just like teaching moment of what these error screens actually mean, because they are extremely confusing.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
So here I see basically nothing useful right now.
Yeah.
Though it looks to me like it might be an error in one of our modules,
Okay.
because it was just going through the interview order block.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a very like specific set of answer choices that causes this to occur.
okay, so tell us about
Is it?
those.
Yeah, tell us about those. I'm also noticing at some part, I'm not sure where, if I had noticed before, something of calling emails maybe. So we might be getting it. Is
Yeah.
this by any means coming up when you're like choosing a court?
It only arises if so like we go through, it asks like who's presenting this petition, and because it's a minor form, it asks if it's parents or guardians, and you can choose either one parent, two parents, one guardian, so on. And it only arises if you select one parent instead. Like it works perfectly fine if you select two parents, it lets you put in all their information, whatnot. But if you select only one parent, when you get to the stage where you're supposed to enter the parent's email address, this is the error that appears. It works fine with two parents, you let you enter both emails, but for some reason with only one, it this
So
is
let's take a look at your question about emails. Is that a question you all wrote?
I believe so. Let me see.
All right, so you can search for email if you want.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I believe it's right down here. Actually, yeah, maybe it might have been one of the assembly line auto-generated questions, but it's just like falls in with like the other parent personal information questions.
Okay.
And I think pretty much all of our issues have been occurring with like selection of either parents or guardians and the numbers of them, and like just either expecting there to be two parents, even though we were trying to give the option to select only one, and then like expecting more personal information. But I'll try not to digress too far from the actual error we're talking about.
So let's search, go on, keep searching through the page for email. Let's see if this is a question you all have written.
Yes, further. Another thing I think that we're a little bit confused about is like how to actually edit and change, or like I don't know if that's even possible, the assembly line auto-generated questions, because we found some like redundancy between the questions that the Weaver had like bolded and auto filled.
Yeah,
and
that's something we can deal with. It's a separate issue though. So, okay. And it's something I bet a lot of people are running into. But okay. So can we go back a few so we can, because you skipped through a few things. Okay, keep going. All right, go ahead. Email. Okay, that's in your review screen. Okay, keep going. Okay, so that's the review screen. Keep going.
I think this is all still
go ahead.
This all looks like it's more review screens.
Screen. Keep going. Yep, review screen. Continue.
There's just a lot of those.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is likely the attachment block that's actually filling in the PDF. So
keep going from there. Actually, oh no, this is going to have undefined, skip undefined, right? Right, Bryce? That's the generated
it will be at the top if it is. I don't know. Okay. So if you want to scroll up to where it says attachment.
Skip undefined. Okay, keep going. That would be.
I have a hunch. I have a hunch on what this is wrong, but
me too. But keep going.
Keep clicking.
Just so we cover our bases here. Keep going. Let's get out of the attachment block. Okay, we're back here. Yep. So do you want to go with it, Bryce?
Yeah. And so some of this is is definitely something we can eventually fix in the waiver, but it's good to know how to fix it anyway, because it's likely if it's likely something that you might come across. So I think this is part might be the part where if you go back to the actual error page, this is the part where like we looked at the bottom, it's still we're still not really sure what's going on. And so this is where like personally I would go back up one section in this like history. So if you scroll up a bit, this is a pretty long section. It's an extremely long section. Yeah. Actually, I think I remember if you go back down to the very bottom.
There's some repeats that we'll be able to cut out of there.
There's some repeats.
Address appears there, like.
Yeah, and that's actually just a separate bug, and you should be able to delete the second and third instances of those. That's just an issue in the Weaver where we're spitting out all the things we need. We will spit out, if we see it be addressed twice, we'll spit it out twice.
We were unsure if that was just because we have like separate input, separate fields for like address, and then like address unit, address street, address zip code, address city.
It is why it happened, but it doesn't need to be there.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think actually if you go to the very bottom, then there might be ways to follow those crumbs, but this isn't something that I would expect anyone to have to like read through. So I have to get my little annotate thing. Right here is the extremely inconspicuous line that says file code block line 39 in module. The rest of this stuff, like sort of like I think like Michelle and Quentin mentioned before, is a lot of internal Python things that doesn't make sense to literally anyone but like the author of DocAssembly, Jonathan. But this, if you can find a line that says something like module, that's essentially what your interview is. It'll like, just because how I don't want to get too much into how Python works, but like it reads through your interview like little like code block by code block and imports it in, and so it'll be called like module. And so I think it might be line 39 in that very long code section, which there's not like an easy way to look at the line 39 since
well, I will tell you the way to do it that I think works the best, and I think it's only in the code section, but if you make a new file and you paste in just the lines you want to count, you will see what line 39 is.
Okay. So like in,
or you can use a little bit of math. That's the other trick.
Yeah.
If you start the starting line and add 39.
Yeah, I'm not good at
that's not always
adding,
easy to do on your head.
Yeah. But so it starts at 63, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 63.
So if you add 30 to 63, that's 93 plus 9 is 102, I think.
Yeah.
So if you go to line 102.
One of these.
Well, it'll be close to here. I don't know.
I think that's actually it's one of it might be one off, but I think it is one of those address blocks. And I think the point is all of that. You're right. It's very much related to the fact that you only entered one parent. And so I'm trying to think of the best way to actually explain this, but I think the issue is in the Weaver, like it's sort of, which by default, whenever we're reading in, you're reading in from a PDF, and the PDF has a section for, hey, there's two spots for parents, like parent 1 information and parent 2 information. And so the Weaver brings it in, it thinks there's always going to be one like information for both of these parents. Yeah. And just because we haven't, like the Weaver isn't quite flexible enough yet to know that, hey, there isn't always going to be 2 parents. If there isn't a second parent or a second guardian, then that information should just be blank. And I believe y'all have been starting to sort of add the, like, if there's one or multiple parents elsewhere.
We've been trying to work around that. And I think Quentin provided us with this line we had some other issue before that was like arising because between the 1 or 2 parent difference, and he suggested this, but we've been trying to tweak stuff since then, but we haven't really been successful with working around that, like not entering a second parent or guardian's information.
That's fair. But yeah, so I think like there are multiple ways to get around it, but the core issue here is that you told DocAssembly that there is only one parent, and so you have a list of parents, and you've told them there's only going to be one. However, you're specifically referring to parents index 1, which is really the second parent. So you've said DocAssemble, there's only going to be one parent, but now you're trying to say, hey, DocAssemble, ask me the second parent's address. There isn't a second parent, and then DocAssemble freaks out and says there's an index error. And so
index meaning you're trying to get at a list item that isn't on the list, which is here you're trying to get at the second parent, and the second parent is not on the list.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that's like the core of what's actually happening. I think the best way to go, like someone, Michelle or David or Quentin can also chime in, but I feel that the best way to fix this you have the right approach with on line 90 parents.gather.
Yes.
And I think DocAssemble is generally flexible enough that you can, like, I think there's a complete attribute. And we might have, I can try and find some good examples, but essentially you can use the dot gather on the parents list to ask all of these questions that you need per parent. So you can automatically ask the address, the phone number, the email per parent. And so you don't have to manually say like, oh, if there's one parent or two parents, or like if there's one parent, only ask the questions for one parent. If there's both, ask the questions for both. You can just say, if I need a parent, like it'll fill in the address and the phone number and the email for that parent. And then .gather will automatically, for any of them. And then .gather will get how many there are and then ask those questions. I can try, I can, we definitely have like some examples of this that I can try and find and send you links to like what that sort of looks like. But I think that's the best approach. I don't know if anyone else has any other ideas there, but.
So the simple approach is to have an if statement, but since we're hoping to teach you all a few things, this is a functionality that we have not taught you yet, so you would not know what it is. And if the examples are not enough, then it is a complex concept. So we can definitely go through gathering. We may even be able to find an old video tutorial from an old Teaching Tuesday about gathering.
Yeah, that would probably be helpful. We didn't like put this in, like that was autumn.
Yeah, that was the Weaver.
Yeah. So just so people like make sure we like to say it for the 5th or 6th time in a different way, hoping that hits. So first thing, is everyone clear on this notion of zero indexing in Python? Like that the start of a list is the first one on a list is called zero?
Yes.
Okay.
Raise your hand if you are familiar with zero indexing.
Like that's this parent 0, parents 1 thing that is showing.
I do not see all hands here. So it might be worth going over real quick.
When you're seeing something like parents, like on line 91 there, parents bracket 0, that's saying get the first entry in parents. So Python's just weird. You could either start counting, at 1 or you could start counting at 0. Python likes to start counting at 0.
Python is very typical. Programming languages are weird.
Programming language, that depends on what your reference point is. So, which is, I guess, what we're talking about. But so 0 is the first entry in a list or any other type of thing. So that's why we were talking about this parents 1. And if we're talking about this parents 1 and we're calling it the second parent, you might be getting confused if you didn't realize that 1 is pointing to the second entry because the first entry it starts at 0. So that was just the first thing to get out there. And then from a logical standpoint, Michelle said the easy way to deal with this would be to use an if statement, right? And what she was saying there was that you could, we're getting the error because it's asking for that parent, that second parent, which is parents 1. Mm-hmm. So you could set up an if statement that said, if you have 2 parents, or then call these variables, or if you didn't have to, so you could imagine some logical setup using an if statement there.
For example, you could say if parent 1, then ask parent 1 questions. If parent 2, after that, you can say if parent 2, then also ask.
We had it set up like that for a while, and it was still giving us the same error.
Yeah, and it was probably something in some other code block referencing something that wasn't in the list. But I think now that's good because it means you sort of conceptually understood what was going on as a problem. And I just wanted to make sure that people got that. Even if you don't quite understand what words you would type to fix it, you sort of got the notion that this error the index error is basically because it was looking for something that it couldn't find. It couldn't find it because it's the very specific circumstance of saying you have one parent, but then the code here is still referencing the second parent. All right.
And great job tracking down, you
Yeah.
tracked down the problem to exactly what it was. So great job.
We talked briefly about this with Aubrey, but just for my own sanity, I kind of feel double checking. It wouldn't create any issues right up here that we have. Oh, sorry, actually. Like we have it in as, like for some reason it only pulled parents, but in our form we had the variables listed as like parent 1, parent 2.
So
Like the same way that guardian 2.
That's intentional, I believe. We just, for the ease of like labeling PDFs, it's a lot easier to read parent 1, parent 2 than parents 1, parents 2. And so I think if you go back down, which is at the very bottom, the attachment block of this form, you'll see that parent 1, parent 2 so there's the key, which is the, I guess if we get there, it's a little easier to see. Way at the bottom.
you can grab the little
Yeah.
scrolling thing, but
Yeah. So here, and so you'll see that like parent 2 name full is the label on the PDF. And then on the right side, you're getting the parents variable in this interview. And that's just a little bit of like, it makes it easier to read. And I think that's one of the few places that we do change like the actual semantic name of the variable to be something relatively different, like parent versus parents. But also if you're ever confused about or if you ever have any bugs of what it actually ends up in the attachment or in the attachment like generated PDF itself, this is always like a good place to check to see what the variable actually on the right is, like that's coming from your interview.
Okay. All right, so I should just keep an eye out for, you said you would find some like links with relevant.
The dot gather.
Yes, yeah. I found a few of them now. I'm going to see if I can try and find.
Want to just explain what gather does so that
I think it's a bit complex to understand along with.
So the idea isn't super complicated. The actual code can be a bit complicated because there's like a lot of different things you can change and customize about it. But the idea is relatively simple. It's like if you so DocAssembly's main sort of core concept is and like the entire reason we're doing this is instead of having here's one big long PDF that you like can fill in the forms, it asks you questions one at a time. And so say instead of like write out all of the people in this or like all of the defendants in this party, we can break it up and so we can sort of gather the individuals in this party at like one by one. And so essentially when you use the gather or when you use DocAssembly's like gather call, it asks you a bunch of different questions. It'll first ask you, are there any, like say if it's, so for parents being the example, it'll say like, are there any parents on this form? And you can say like yes or no. And then if you say yes, like it'll first ask you like the minimum amount of information it needs to make like a parent object, which usually is the name. And so you fill out the parent's name, and then after you fill out that parent, it'll say, are there any more parents on this form? And you then again say yes or no. And if you say yes, it'll start slowly like append, which is just add another parent onto the end of the list. And you'll keep doing that, like filling in information for that parent. And then is there another one? Yes or no. If you say no, it's done. Like DocAssembly says that this list is, I think it says like complete. There's some attribute that it sets that lets you know it's done, and it goes on and asks other questions in the interview. And if you keep saying yes, it'll keep adding to this list, and you can add 4, 5, 6 if you really need to.
You can add an infinite amount if you really need to.
Yeah.
Countably infinite. But yeah, so there's
Exactly.
Oh yeah, but that's essentially the core idea. And like Michelle said, it can get really complicated because for your case, you only need 2 parents. You don't want people to fill in 4 or 5. And so there's a way you can customize that. And there's a way you can customize not only asking the name of the parent, but their address and their email.
Yeah.
And so it gets pretty complicated, but the core idea is it just goes through one by one and asks if, like, do you have, like, are there any, are there more? Fill in the information for this one, keeps going, etc.
So is that the kind of thing that we should not like mess with at all, or would it be okay to remove that? Because I think that kind of is creating redundancies, since we already asked in a prior question.
I think that's a separate issue, actually.
Okay. Should
So you don't get rid of it. You just use this mechanic in the way it is meant to be used, but we can show you how to use it properly in order to not get redundant questions.
I see. Because
My
we've already,
sis-
prior to the point of the gathering, like whether or not there are parents presenting the form on behalf of the child. So then when it again asks, is there a parent on this form? It's kind of like,
Yep, we can take care of that.
okay.
Because you can tell DocAssemble whenever there is a variable that DocAssemble wants, you and it's asking a question because of it, you can just define the variable. Now, sometimes you need to define it in a specific way if you want specific behavior. But if you just want to get rid of a question, which I suggest not doing with this one, you look at the variable that's there, you copy it and paste it in your code, you put a little equals sign after it, and you give it a value, and the question will not be asked. In this particular case, because you're asking about a list, you don't want to do that. You want to work with DocAssemble as opposed to against it. But you can always make questions. You can almost always make questions disappear.
Okay.
Yeah, and those duplicates come up a lot of times when you've sort of made your own homebrew sort of stuff, and then there's some basic question stuff that's going on. And so you're maybe it looks to the end user like you're asking the same questions, but obviously they're tied to different variables. And so the question is how to sort out those variables in the back end.
And you can always override a question in assembly line with your own contents by looking at source, copying the question that is there and putting it in your own interview. Because assembly line is above your interview, your questions will be asked first. Your questions will be given preference.
Okay.
So you can basically overwrite the basic questions at any time if you want. The drawback then, of course, is that if you do that, then if there are ever changes or updates to the basic questions to make them better, you don't get those because your overwritten version is the one that's being used. So
like translations and stuff.
Yeah. So there's a strong preference to use the basic questions, which is why if it's like, oh, well, we're getting these duplicates and we already wrote these things, well, we want to make sure that we're tying to the basic questions if we can, because that's going to give some benefit down the road. So, I mean, a lot of what we do is, I guess, and this is, I don't know, does it sound all philosophical, but a lot of what we're doing is we're balancing whether or not we're going to spend time on this now or time on it later. And oftentimes spending some time on it now can save you a lot of time later. So, so it's just that calculus.
All right, well, thank you everyone for helping me figure that out a bit and work.
Yeah, so we'll get Bryce we'll put some of the gather documentation in the teams, and then you can look at that and then respond with questions.
Thank you.
And maybe we'll try and find a link to that YouTube video that actually goes through doing it and the rationale behind the code that builds it.
But like about the gather function. Perfect.
Yeah, and Donna and Connor, how does that all sound to you?
Yeah, perfect. If you have a look at the videos, probably it would make it a bit clearer, because I think that like the whole issue is concentrated on this part really, and when we try to change anything, it would create errors in different places again. So I'd say like if we fix this one, we should be fine then.
Yeah, and do remember, yours is, I think, in the starting documents we gave people is probably, if not the most complex, one of the most. There was a reason why we put the 3 of you on it as opposed to just 2 people. So do remember that.
I'll stop my screen share now if we're moving on to someone else's question. I do have another question, but I can save it for the end if I'll let. I just was pretty long-winded with that one, so I'll hand off to someone else.
That does happen sometimes, but since we answered the first question, let's move to another team. Matt, I don't know if you had your question.
No,
already.
I'm fine letting
Just-
these
all
teams
right.
go.
Just
Please
wa- just
continue.
wanted to
Thank you
check
for
it. Just-
asking. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
check back in. I think, is it Shauna and Kajal, did you guys have a question? No? Joelle? Well, that's all of our teams that are still here, I think.
Well, then there you go.
Oh, I thought there were more
Yeah,
questions.
I thought there were more questions too.
That might have been
3
earlier,
teams
but we
that-
might have lost them.
Yeah, yeah, we might
That's
have
okay.
lost
So
them.
you've waited them out.
So
You're up again. So team Big Forum, what do you got?
So our last one is more of a not really like a coding thing so much, more of just like logic, I guess. But we just realized, like, originally our plan, we were just taking every form on the PDF, create a question that corresponds with it, and then we realized afterwards, once we're going through the interview, that the last like page and a half or so is asking about, like, it seems like stuff that the notary public is going to have to fill in once they've notarized the form. It's like, when did the plaintiff like appear before you, and like what's the form of ID they presented you and stuff. So does that make sense to include in the interview, because you most likely aren't going to be taking the interview in the presence of your notary? Or like, so should we just remove those questions from the interview, or should we include something that asks like, is your notary public like present at this time? If yes, then like all the stuff. If no, then don't ask any notary questions.
Well, here, let's be all teacherly. But what do other people think?
Other anybody or other
Anybody?
people? So I think probably asking the person if a notary is there is the most useful, but I might say as an MVP, you could, just because there's a lot to do, you could say a notary public has to fill in the rest of these questions. And in your attachment block, I would just put an empty strings, that is 2 quotes next to each other.
Okay.
Right? That just contain nothing in them.
Mm-hmm.
And then those fields will come out blank in the PDF.
Okay.
But
then,
that might be the MVP. That would be not up to me because I'm not an SME. Like if it's required, right? You have to ask your SME, how required is it for this to be filled before someone does this?
Mm-hmm.
But in an even further in the future goal would be to have the person be able to send the interview at that point to their notary if they need to, and then have the notary fill in those pieces. I don't know how notaries work, so maybe they need to be physically there.
Yeah, they've got all sorts of
Is
rules.
it like a witness? Is it like having a witness there? Never mind then. So
yeah,
but
sorry.
Yeah, Amber.
No, I was going to ask if you know if this is one that a notary can fill out, or if it's one that they need the clamp.
I'm
sometimes
I could do some more research, but I'm pretty certain you need to be physically there and like get the stamp of approval from the notary.
Yeah.
Because it has like instead of just filling in the date, it has like a sentence structure where it's like, on this blank day of blank month of blank year, so and so appeared before me, the notary public, and like presented me with this form of identification.
Mm-hmm. So they're gonna have to, sounds like, print it out.
Yeah.
This is not something that we're sending directly to the court.
I mean, at the very least, you can send it digitally to the notary and then go meet them in person and complete it digitally with them.
Yeah.
So it might still make sense to include like a send to notary function, but
yeah, it's like a thought, because like you can go to the bank for a notary.
Yeah, it'd be nice to say I sent it along and here it is.
Yeah, so like still have, sorry to finish that thought with, so they could still send it, maybe if they don't have a printer, to print it out themselves, you know, have the bank print it for you and things like that. Okay. Yeah.
I really liked the way Michelle approached that, and she did it so quickly that I want to make sure we pause so that everyone understands that thought process. She said, I think ultimately this might be good, but for MVP, this might be good. So I want everyone to start thinking about that distinction. There are going to be things that would make it a perfect form, but then the question is, what is the smallest set of features that I could release into the world and it be helpful to someone and not harmful, right? Those sort of two sides together. And I think that that thinking as a way you want to approach this. And I think Michelle's assumption is correct, that I think the way you should move forward for now, and again, we'll validate with a SME, but is to consider that additional function as MVP. So you could just right now, you could just be said like, you have to fill this out in person with someone.
And I would
then,
make
yeah.
2 or 3 issues for that. One is one which has the milestone. And have you all gone over milestones?
I don't think so.
Okay, well,
In our group, we talked about the milestones. Like, we just saw that on the Trello card. There was a thing for like created a milestone for like MVP, and then potentially other, depending on your goals.
In the GitHub documentation, there might be something to link you to documentation about milestones. But the idea would be to put the MVP milestone on the one that you're gonna do, or to assign it to someone, or to say MVP next to it, so that, and then for the other ones to say version 2 or version 3 or whatever, or just for the future. Just to be clear, so if someone comes into those issues afterwards, they see what needs to be implemented, and they also see what the plan is. So you would make separate issues and mark them appropriate.
That makes sense. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Any other lingering questions? No?
So a lot of really good progress. It's hard to believe you've just been doing this for, well, how you want to count is the interesting thing, right? We had our first weeks where we all were getting up to speed, but then you just had 1 week where you've sort of really been in the thick of it. So, it's like a week and some change you've been working on this, and we've already, I mean, they're not here anymore, but we had one form that already produces output. Where are other folks on this call about that? Do you produce output yet? Or yeah, so you're all at this magical point where you've sort of gotten over the like, there's a thing there in the world now that exists that didn't exist before because of stuff you did. It's not quite ready to share with everyone yet, but it exists because of stuff you did. So that's, I think that's pretty cool.
100% agree.
Yeah,
It's
it
the
rocks.
rush. It's the rush. If you're not getting a rush from this, you might want to think a bit about what your choices are.
Well, then,
Yeah,
you only got to be with us for another couple months.
Yeah.
exactly. You just have to survive, and we'll get to the other side.
Yeah, I think it takes working through your first bug to like get
It's
that
true,
that
it's
adrenaline
true.
rush.
That's fair. And you know what? Sometimes
Yeah.
it takes being able to write a few lines of code without an error to
Yeah.
get there. But
Yeah.
so different people get to it at different points. But if they're gonna get there, but you deserve a rush. If you didn't get one, you at least deserve one.
All right, well spoken. Well,
Great job. Make sure to ask questions before next Tuesday in the channel. I will help you write the question. We will share screen and write the question. I will not answer it so that we have a busy channel, because it's been suspiciously quiet, but other than everyone's doing good. So great job.
Yeah. You think we're sitting there thinking, oh, no questions means everything's going well. We're sitting there freaking out. No questions.
Yeah.
What's wrong?
I'm so nervous.
Yeah. No questions to me is like, oh no, everyone's stuck. They don't know where to go. What's happening?
They don't. Yeah. Like, what did I forget to tell them?
Yeah.
What do they not know? But you guys it looks like you're trying to work through it. And I understand that desire.
We'll try and trust you. We'll try and trust you. If you start asking questions, we will trust you more. Because then we'll know when you're not asking questions, you're actually okay.
Yeah.
So got to build that relationship a little bit.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, great work. We'll talk to you all on the Teams.
Yeah, on Teams, and then Friday, and then remember, well, we don't usually have meetings with this group on Monday, but no meetings on Monday.
No meetings on Monday. All right.
All right.
Thank you again, everyone.
Good luck.
Thank you, Bryce, for posting that. I saw that you put the link in the team, so thank you for that.
Yeah.